Okay, welcome, Amber. Do you want to introduce yourself? Just give us a brief overview of who you are and tell us a little bit about you.
Okay, so my name's Amber Collins. I'm known on Instagram and TikTok as It's Amber Collins. I'm a podcast host of the podcast The Neurodivergent Awakening, and I'm a content creator, and that's kind of where I am at the moment. I'm also a mum to a neurodivergent little boy, and I'm autistic and ADHD myself. So my whole platform is all about kind of accepting neurodivergence, understanding your neurodivergence, especially from the perspective of someone who was late diagnosed and childhood diagnosed, because I had two separate diagnoses. So I've kind of been able to give those experiences and the experience of being a parent while being neurodivergent.
Great, thank you very much. That's perfect. Okay, so let's jump straight in, I guess.
Yeah.
So, can you share with us your personal journey of being diagnosed as autistic and then later in life having your ADHD diagnosis? How did they impact your life and your self-understanding?
Cool. Oh God, it's kind of like a very long story. So I was diagnosed autistic at around 3.5 years old, which was quite unusual for a girl of my age. I'm 31 now, so this was like 1996. So quite unusual for a girl to be diagnosed. And I was actually diagnosed as low functioning. We don't obviously use that term anymore. But essentially what was flagged was the fact that I was completely nonverbal. I was delayed in quite a few areas, like quite significantly. And so that happened. And I was put in a kind of like a mainstream school that had a SEND base. So I don't know what they call them something else now, but at the time that's what it was called. And that was all fine. What was really unusual about my experience was no one told me I was autistic. So there was never a conversation had with anyone sat me down and said, this is, why you are the way you are. This is why you're in this school. This is why you're in this class. By the time my speech started coming on and around 6, they realised actually intellectually I wasn't impacted by my autism. I was then kind of slowly moved over into mainstream. So I had some friends in mainstream, some friends in the SEND bit, and everything was fine. And yes, there were impacts such as, I did struggle with friendships a little bit. I did struggle to kind of make sense of the world around me. And I kind of always felt like everyone else kind of had like a manual that I never got, if that makes sense.
Does.
I kind of, I don't know, I just couldn't quite get to grips with all the things that everyone else could get to grips with. And I did, experience some bullying and that kind of thing. But it's one of those things that you only understand it later on. So I would think people were my friends, and then my mum would be like, oh, you shouldn't really hang around with them. And actually it turns out they were bullying me, but I had no idea. So It's like kind of a lot of it's retrospective. And I kind of got through school, everything was fine. And again, I went up until at the age of 13. I'd never heard the word autism, never heard the word, sensory overstimulation. Like none of these words existed in my vocabulary. And then one day I saw the word autism on a form that my mum was filling out for me. And I said, oh, what's that? And she was like, oh, no, you don't need to worry about that. And I think for her, growing up in the 90s, I think she was concerned that I would get picked on, or maybe I would, regress, or I don't know what, I don't really know. Like we've had conversations about it, and now she says she wouldn't have chosen to do that. But at the time, that's what she thought was the best idea. So, that's that. Yeah. And moving on, got through secondary school, again, similar kind of experiences. And I had a one-to-one up until year 9. So again, I was around 13. And they suddenly what was called a statement at the time, it's now called an EHCP, that was taken off me. So, and that really set me back. And I think the reason I did do okay at school was because, and I understand this now as I've gotten older, every sort of minute of your life is kind of regimented and structured, like when you're at school. Yeah. So when you're having lessons, when you're doing certain things. Yeah. And I struggled a lot with my schoolwork at home, but not at school, because I didn't really have an environment at home to do my schoolwork. Mm-hmm. But at the time, that was just kind of put down to other things. Again, I didn't know what autism meant. No one had explained it to me. And fast forward to kind of getting through school, getting through college, struggling, getting through work. I found a career that meant I worked in beauty, and I could kind of bounce around. It was more accepted to bounce around and move around. That was all fine. Yeah. So I did that. And I remember a few times people would just kind of assume I had ADHD. That was often, if I ever said to anyone, oh, I'm autistic, they would be like, no way, there's no way you're autistic. And
Yeah.
there was family members that were like, I think they got it wrong. I don't think you are. Like, it was all very like, everyone was like, surely that's a mistake. Like, she's fine. But quite a lot of people would assume that I had ADHD, like people that I just met or like people I worked with. They go, oh, no, because you've got ADHD. And I'm like, no, I don't. And it was a theme that kept repeating. And then I got to around about the age of 25, had what I understand now was a big autistic burnout. So I basically had a huge breakdown, couldn't cope with anything anymore, had to give up work for a little bit. And I completely changed careers, found a job like down the road in a little office. And I was like, that'll do me. And I got pregnant all in the midst of that. So, which probably wasn't the
Wow.
best idea. Yeah. So I kind of not quite recovered from my burnout and got pregnant. And I was like, oh, this is great. This is what I want. Because I really wanted to be a mum. That's all I ever wanted from life, was to be a mum and have a baby. And as soon as my son was born, I would say pretty quickly, I was like, I think there's something not quite right here. And I remember thinking, oh, like, like just little things that he did. He never stopped moving. He didn't
Yeah.
sleep. And I remember he'd literally, like, he'd lay there, and where most babies would just chill, he was like, the whole time.
Yeah.
I remember getting him checked, thinking, because I was like, is he having a seizure? Like, it was constant. And he did
Yeah.
not sleep. He would literally sleep for 10 minutes, then wake up again, another 10 minutes, then wake up again. And he struggled with feeding, he had tongue tie, all these different things. Really bad colic. And a lot of it was put down to, oh, you're a first time mum and it's this hard and don't worry.
Yeah.
But I remember feeling like it was so much harder for me than everyone else. Like, and I was like,
Yeah.
am I just really stupid? Like, do I just not understand this? And by the time he was around 1, well, I'd say sooner, because I remember he was doing the hands, and another baby I knew did this. We'd be baby groups, and
Flapping.
he'd be
Yeah.
doing this, shed flapping. And I was like, no one else's baby does that. And no one ever said anything to me. But I remember everyone would kind of look and they'd go, oh, he's just excited. And I'm like, yeah, like he's happy. But like, is that normal? And no one really said anything. And then I remember he had his 1-year check, and he was quite delayed in a few areas. And then we had lockdown, and all of a sudden everything kind of just comes to the surface where, we were like, oh, actually, this is quite significant. There's quite a few significant things happening.
Yeah.
I started looking into it, and the first thing you get when you type in my child is hand flapping is autism. And I was like, oh, so this thing that I apparently have is what he must have. And that's when I started researching it all, looking into it all. And I realised very quickly, because at the time I was very angry. I was just like, why is it my kid? And, what's going on? I had all the wrong kind of mindset about it. And I was grieving. Like, I didn't understand what was going on. And I remember kind of sitting back and going, the sooner I understand myself and the sooner I understand this, I can get out of this like victim mentality and actually help us both. And that's when I started deep diving into it. And that's when I started talking about it. And as soon as I started talking about autism online, I got lots of messages that were like, do you have ADHD as well? And I was like, do you know what? It's something that's always come up, but I've never felt the need to explore it. And the more I started looking at ADHD, it just kind of, the final pieces of that puzzle, the final pieces of like, why don't I resonate with every single autistic experience suddenly made sense. And things that I'd thought were anxiety, things that I thought were maybe I have anger issues, maybe I'm this and I'm that and I'm lazy and blah, blah, blah. I realised I wasn't. It was, I have ADHD. So I got diagnosed last year, a week before I turned 30, and with, in his words, quite severe ADHD. I think I'm combined type, but I'm more inattentive. So I'm more on the inattentive, and that makes sense because people were like, oh, you're not very hyperactive. I'm like, well, no, because I have inattentive ADHD. Yes, so I forget stuff and I procrastinate. I have massive time blindness and I get really fixated in things and then like forget what I'm doing. Like even coming onto this call, I was like, oh, I've got 5 minutes. I'll quickly look up something. And next thing I know, I was like, crap, it's like 5 minutes past. And I'm like trying to scramble to get on because I can't. If you said to me how long is 5 minutes, I wouldn't be able to tell you. I wouldn't be able to measure it. Where our people can. So my son got diagnosed 3 weeks after I got diagnosed with ADHD. So he's now diagnosed autistic and he's starting school this year. And that's kind of where we are now. So that's kind of
just
it,
to
really.
Confirm. So there was just one detail that I wanted to just confirm. What age was it that you was then finally actually told about being autistic, or was it just you picking up those little bits of information?
I had to work it out. So I would say by the time I was 28 was when I understood it.
Wow. And did
I was
anyone ever
diagnosed.
actually turn around to you and say, you are autistic, or you just basically had to?
No, my mum did say in the end, she was like, no, you are autistic. That was at 13, but it wasn't, I knew what the word was, but I didn't know what it meant.
So
And
we
that
just,
was
yeah,
the
you are, but
difference.
then,
Yeah.
okay, I
Oh,
get
this
you.
is why you're in the Zen. It was like, oh, this is why you're in the Zen base. And I was like, oh, okay, what is it? And no one could explain it to me. And I remember going into school, because this was secondary school, and being shown the film Rain Man, like randomly, nothing to do. No, I hadn't mentioned it to anyone. I hadn't told a single person. I was so freaked out that I was different. And I already got picked on for various other things. I didn't want to add something else to it. And in my mind, and I remember watching Rain Man going, I don't do any of that. I'm shit at maths. Like, and that was everything I looked up was, oh, really good, like highly intelligent, very good at maths. I was like, no, that ain't me. And I was like, oh, it must be wrong. It must be wrong. And that was it. And it was only when I was 28 doing my own research, that was when I understood it. And I was like, oh, my presentation's different because I'm a woman and because I have ADHD as well. Yeah, there's a spectrum.
There's so many different factors.
Yeah. Like me, I look at me, my son, and the other members of my family who are autistic, and like my partner's family and that kind of thing. There are similarities, but there's also a lot of wild differences. And like you say, it's a spectrum. So it's, that was what I needed to understand. And that's what no one ever explained to me. So we're obviously trying to do it differently with my son. But yeah, it was a bit wild.
It's been a ride. Oh, bless you.
Been a ride, yeah.
But there's a lot. It's nice to hear. I guess obviously this is the first time we've actually sat and I've heard your story, all of it, bit by bit, and there's so much that I can relate to, but I know a lot of people who are watching this will be able to relate to as well.
Yeah,
so it's really good to hear. Okay, so as an autistic and ADHD woman, what are some of the unique challenges you face on a daily basis, and how do you navigate these challenges and maintain a sense of well-being? Or try to.
Yeah, I'll say try to. I think as a woman, the unique challenges that kind of happen, especially growing up, is kind of around hormones and puberty. I would say for me were the biggest things that had a huge impact. My cycle massively impacts me more than the neurotypical people in my life. And, if you have ADHD and autism, you're more likely to have things like PMDD. You're more likely to suffer with things like postpartum depression, postpartum psychosis. So those elements massively affected me. Like I would be horrendous around my time of the month, and I couldn't. Again, I just thought, oh, it's another thing that's wrong with me. Like I just always felt like I was this like shit pet. Like I was just shit at being a human. So
bless you.
That just added to that. Do you know what I mean? So that was a massive thing. Another thing that I find, and I've spoken to quite a few women that have gone through a similar thing, obviously autistic women in particular are more likely to end up in domestic violence situations and kind of manipulation situations, be coerced into things that they're not ready for. And I look back on my kind of teenagehood and my kind of coming of age kind of part of my life. I wasn't ready to do certain things that I ended up doing because it's what everyone else was doing and I wanted to fit in and I wanted to be like everyone else. So, and I can't sit here and say I've been, sexually assaulted. I haven't, but there's definitely been situations where I shouldn't have been in those positions. And I look back and I'm like, I wasn't ready to do that thing and I did it because I wanted to be like everyone else. And also I think you're very, very susceptible to kind of attracting kind of narcissistic behavior and people who will manipulate you. Even if they don't know you're autistic, they can sense that you're vulnerable and they will use that to their advantage. And I look back, especially not so much in my relationships. I'm really, really lucky. I met my partner when I was 19. Had I not met him, I don't know what would have happened to me, if I'm totally honest, like in the sense of I don't know what kind of relationships I may have entered into because he's always kind of really looked after me and kept me kind of safe and we've always stayed together. But in a friendship circle, especially with women, like friendships between women are already quite difficult, even if you're not neurodivergent. And there's a lot of nuances and there's a lot of undercover things that happen. And there would be things that happened and I didn't understand why. Like I don't understand like jealousy. I understand what jealousy
and
is.
that kind of thing.
Yeah,
it's
like
the
yeah,
relatability to it, and lying. When people lie, I find it really strange. For
yes,
example, it's
yeah,
to do with the social side, but also something you said there about um, when you are not ready to do something, or you do certain things because obviously you get the social side, but also, like autistic children, for example, they're often compelled to follow rules, if that makes sense, and
yes,
to do as
yes,
they're told, that kind of
yeah,
thing. That's why a lot of
yeah,
autistic children are known for being very well behaved, because they follow that set of rules, everything's
yeah,
literal, that kind of thing. So
yeah.
there are a lot of factors. It makes sense. Yeah.
And I think it's the social rules as well. Like if all your friends are having sex and getting into
Mm.
relationships, you're going to think, oh, this is what everyone does, so I need to do the same because I need to
Yeah,
fit
yeah,
in.
yeah.
And it's that kind of thing. And it was just putting myself in very, like, I look back and I'm like, I put myself in some really vulnerable fucking situations,
Yeah.
and I shouldn't have been in them. And even down to like meeting people, like I attracted friendships where they would take advantage of me, they would use me for things, or they would try and manipulate me to act a certain way for
Yeah.
their own gain, because
Hmm.
I was someone who I would literally mold myself to whoever they wanted me to be. So yeah, that's kind
I can
of,
relate. Yeah,
yeah,
I get
yeah.
it.
And I think as a woman, like with men, it tends to be a lot more. And I notice this with my partner because we don't know what he's not diagnosed with anything, but we've all kind of accepted now that he's probably neurodivergent himself. Like
Hmm.
we were laughing the other week. So I was like, my partner doesn't think he's autistic. He's got a collection of like fire engine models and all this shit in my house. And I'm like,
Yeah.
and no, but all jokes aside, and I look at how he navigates his friendships, and he's very black and white, which I don't have. I don't have the black and whiteness that he does. So if
Yeah.
someone's horrible to him, he's just like, oh, fuck yeah. Like, sorry, can I swear on this? I'm sure I swore, sorry. He's like, oh, sod ya. And
Yeah.
yeah, like he'll just end the friendship and that'll be the end of it.
Yeah.
And he will be like, whatever, they're horrible to me, I don't want to be their friend anymore. And I'm
And
like, does
yeah.
that not upset you? Like, do you not worry about the nuances of that?
Yeah.
And it's, with women, it's so much more complicated. So I think that's the layer of it, that
We're quite emotional, and we hold on to that
yeah,
emotion and dwell. And then it's also the emotional
ruminate.
regulation as well, and the
Yeah,
dwelling. And yeah, I
yeah,
get it.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Definitely. So I think that's been my biggest struggle. I've always felt like I'm not a bad girl, but like I'm bad at being a woman, if that
I
makes
get what you
sense.
mean, because it's the navigating being a woman, which is already hard, but it's
Yeah,
those additional hurdles that we have, and
yeah,
trying to, I guess, make sense of them, because they are
yeah,
so confusing, and they
yeah,
swap and change as well.
yeah. The
Plus, you've
expectations
also
change.
got the ADHD and the autism kind of
Mm,
bouncing off of each other, which is
yeah,
like a
yeah,
whole new diagnosis by itself. So,
yeah,
yeah,
yeah, 100%. And I think like it's hard enough for a neurotypical woman to navigate these things, let
yeah,
alone a neurodivergent one. And
exactly.
I think I'm trying to think how to word it. Like even becoming a mother, it was very eye opening. Like I view everything so differently to other people. And the expectations that women have on them anyway, especially in the modern age, like in 2023, we're
Yeah,
expected to work, we're expected to be these amazing, present, gentle parents, and we have to give them healthy organ, like all these things, and all these
yes,
things. And even my mum's like, we didn't have all this. Like, you had your baby, and it was expected you were just going to stay at home, and you just went back to work when you were
get on
ready, and
with it.
that
Yeah,
was, and you got on with it. Whereas it's so not like that now, and trying to navigate that, already feeling like you're a shitty human. Like you're doing something that you're not actually able to do, and then you're trying to navigate this extra kind of level of expectation. Like it's really hard.
which is the
So
hardest
yeah,
job in the world as well,
yeah,
with
yeah,
social media and
yeah,
expectations and everything else. Yeah,
yeah,
I get
hundred
it.
percent. Like social media is so good in so many ways, in a sense of like I've created a community in it. If it wasn't for social media, I probably wouldn't have got my ADHD diagnosis. I probably wouldn't have understood my autism ever, because when you look
Yeah,
at kind of the official text on autism, things that are written from a non-autistic perspective, it's viewed as like a deficit, it's viewed as like this really bad thing, and they talk about it in these very like structured terms, where
yeah,
actually when you speak to autistic women and you talk about the experiences, actually it's something I can really relate to. And I'm like, oh, I am like, this is who I am, after
yeah,
years of kind of gaslighting myself that I wasn't.
yeah,
So social media is great in that sort of respect, but actually in other ways it can be really detrimental. Like I remember there was points when my son was first, I would say for the first 2 years of my son's life, I came off social media because I found it too triggering to see other children exceeding milestones that he wasn't doing it, that were younger than him. Like, I'll be totally honest, I found that really hard. And I found it really hard because I would think I was doing something right, and then I'd read something, I was like, oh, I'm doing it wrong, and I would tailspin over it. Like I remember having a huge meltdown because I watched a video of someone's 14-month-old helping them load the dishwasher, and my son was like 3 at the time, and I was like, there's no way. And I was like, would you? And I remember saying to my friends, like, would you let your kids do that? Is that not like, oh my God, I'm not letting him do the dishwasher? And it's such a very little thing, but it's enough to make you spiral and really doubt yourself.
No, of course.
Yeah.
No, I get it. I do. I'm just feeling a bit sad, obviously, because I met you. I met you. It must have been when you first come back to social media.
I'd first started talking about it. Like, I remember I kind of out of the blue, I did a post. I started doing, so I did like a little bit of network marketing. So that's what made me come back to social media, was I did a little bit of network marketing, and I was trying to earn some extra money at the end of the pandemic. And so my son had literally just turned 2, and I started doing that, and I got my confidence up a little bit. And I remember I was looking into like we're both quite woo-woo, like we've spoken about this before, and I was looking into like this kind of mindset stuff and this manifestation stuff, and I kept getting this feeling like, you need to talk about this. And it was around the time that I was researching everything, and I was like, because Brody was like officially on Pathway at this point, and I was like, you know what, I'm just going to make a post. And I didn't even know it was National Autism Awareness Day. I was like, oh, if I'm going to do a post, I'll do it today. Like I didn't even know.
Yeah.
And the response I got was so lovely. And obviously once you start talking about certain things, the algorithm opens you up. And I remember finding you, because when I was pregnant, I genuinely thought I was like the only autistic mum on the planet, because it just wasn't spoken about. It wasn't spoken about.
It wasn't.
And, no. And obviously, you know the story anyway about my midwife, who was like, oh, I'm just going to put you have anxiety, because I did declare it to my midwife. I was like, oh, like I'm autistic. And she was like, I'm not going to put that on your records. And I was like, oh, okay. And she just put I had anxiety, and that was it. And I was like, oh, right, this is something I can't ever talk about then. And I was terrified. I was terrified I was going to get him taken off me. I genuinely thought that was what was going to happen. I was so scared. So
and it wasn't even that long ago. That makes me so angry.
No. And now
it's really bad.
And I went through such an horrendous labour, which would have impacted my son as well.
Yeah.
Because I wasn't able to advocate for myself. Because I wasn't able to say, look, you know, I've got sensory issues, and I'm not going to understand this, and you need to explain things to me, very much like, you know, now if I was to have another child, it would be different. I would be able to do those things, but I didn't. I had no idea how to do that. So it's a lot. And I think that's something that doesn't really ever get spoken about, is about the actual birth and labour and advocating yourself.
Even
in
the
those
way
situations.
we present to pain, our pain thresholds of sometimes
Different.
either really high or really low. Like mine's really high, and I didn't look like I was in labour, so they didn't actually take me seriously. And like you say, we're not able to advocate for ourselves, or we aren't always as emotional as others, or sometimes we're more emotional.
Too emotional, right.
There's so much, like you say, or masking because we don't want to appear a certain way.
Yeah.
And it is a very, very important topic. I'm just glad that you did find me and the community, because I remember seeing the relief that you had of, oh my God, we can talk about it.
I was like, oh shit. And it was like, sorry, I'm swearing again. And I was like, oh my God, I've never met another neurodivergent mum. And I remember being like, oh my God, you're autistic and you're a mum, and you were just getting on with it. And I was like, oh my God, she's got 2 kids. Like, you know, I was like, oh my God, you know. And
Remy had just been diagnosed at that point as well.
Yeah, it was like a BBC thing you had done, and it came from my stories. And I remember just being like, oh my God, I'm not alone. And now I speak to other neurodivergent mums every day. There's thousands of us.
We're all here.
We're all here existing, all having, like you say, really similar experiences in birth, postpartum. And like, I'm 4 years postpartum, I still feel like I've had a newborn. Do you know what I mean? Like, for different reasons. Yeah. And, you know, our bodies handle things differently, and we store trauma differently, and we, you know, like you say, the pain threshold thing, I have a really low pain threshold. So I was literally like screaming, and they were like, nothing's happening. Why are you screaming? And the midwives were getting annoyed with me when I was in labour. And then when I actually went into labour,
it's the spectrum of things. Whereas they'll see you, but then they won't realise that I was actually 10 centimetres dilated, and I had to say,
Wow.
look, I'm ready to push, but I was calm. And
Yeah.
they had me in the waiting room and wouldn't let me into the labour suite. It was only when I got in
Wow.
there that they realised. But the problem is, there's not enough information out there, and you can
No.
be on either side. So
No.
it's really like
I think
interesting
there's
to hear.
I think there's a lot to be said as well about the way that like the medical community views women anyway, and women's health. I think that's a whole nother layer to it.
Yeah,
And I think there's a real problem with these people that do these jobs day in, day out. Like, I'm not saying, like, most midwives are amazing, don't get me wrong, and I
yeah,
experience some amazing care, but I also experienced kind of the, like, people kind of not understanding that, you know, it's your body, you know your body, and you know when there's something wrong.
yeah.
And I think there's a lot of people that don't understand that, and they just go, oh no, you're fine, you're fine. And
So
it
they
took,
become numb to it in a way as well.
yeah, yeah, they do. They become numb to it, and they don't realise that, you know, you're trying to explain something. And it only was when I think I was literally about 9 centimetres, and one, or no, was I 10? I can't remember. Basically, the pushing went on for ages. He got stuck, my son. And one of the main doctors came in and was like, this has gone on for too long. He's like, look, it was a woman actually. She was like, you've got an hour to get this baby out, or I'm taking it down to theatre and I'm going to cut you up. I'm going to open you up myself.
Yeah.
And I ended up managing to get him out. And it was only because I had this old school midwife come in that was like, right, you know, and I think she recognised what was going on, whether or not she had the words for it or not, but she was just like, you're not having the gas, because the gas basically had stopped me connecting. I didn't even know what was going on. I was like numb at one point. Like, I didn't know what was happening. So where people
Probably
were like, oh, you just
exhausted as well.
Yeah, it went on for like 48 hours. And I was falling asleep at like 9 centimetres dilated. I fell asleep.
I remember you telling me the story because it was similar to my birth with Chase. It was Remy that I was just calm, but with Chase it was exactly the same. You get to that point where you're exhausted, you can't, and the baby then starts to get distressed, and but it's dangerous without the awareness.
It's so dangerous.
Honestly.
And you wonder how many babies and how many mums have gone through this who now even don't know. They don't know that's why. That's the thing that worries me. And
millions,
and how many went through postpartum depression or a psychosis. And, you know, obviously postpartum psychosis isn't like massively uncommon. No. And how many of those are undiagnosed? How many of those are undiagnosed? Not just that,
but you go to the doctors when you do have, because I had with both of mine, and you don't get no help.
No,
barely.
Oh no,
and
barely.
I thought they'd be like warning signs, because it's dangerous, and I was sent on my way twice.
No, yeah. Wow.
No, it's twice. I think they go through a series of questions, and I find that unless you're self-harming or a danger to yourself, no help at all.
Or a danger to the baby, they just don't care. And
they don't realise that can progress
and so quickly. And the thing that I did, and I've spoken to a few people again that have had this experience, after my birth, I was so scared that someone would take him off me because I'm autistic, I'm not fit to have him. I masked. So I was massively suffering, and I just hid it, didn't tell anyone. I remember getting really upset one day and saying to my partner, like, you need to, I need you to understand this is how I'm feeling. I need you to really pick up the pack. Like, I can't do everything. Bearing in mind my son didn't sleep. It was just, it's funny because I was talking to somebody the other day about having more kids, and I was like, you know what? If someone handed me a 2-year-old, I could do it. I would have like 10 kids. If you just handed me a 2-year-old and went, there you go, it's that newborn. I can't do. Maybe I could, because I'd understand it more. But I feel really sorry for.
They're different though. If that gives you any kind of reassurance. Chase has never slept, but he was an easy newborn, whereas Remy was just, we weren't connected at that point. But during lockdown, everyone, all they saw was just me during meltdowns with her constantly all the time. And so bear that in mind. If it brings you any comfort. They are all different. They're hard work, but different.
No, I think it's more the fact that I just didn't. I think it's more the fact that I didn't have the information, and now I do have the information. Things could be different, and what I would like to see is there to be the information out there for midwives and for, you know, that kind of sector, because I think it's just never spoken about. And it's not just autism and ADHD, it's Tourette's, it's dyspraxia, because that can make your body present things differently. It can be dyslexia. You cannot be able to understand what's happening because you can't, you know, and also you need instructions given to you in a certain way. Even down to women that have like bipolar or, you know, BPD or whatever, like
OCD
all these
as
things.
well.
OCD is a massive one, of course. And, you know, these things are just not acknowledged. And it's just like, I'll get on with it. And there's just no real awareness of what it looks like. Or you get the other end of the spectrum where they almost don't allow you to have your voice because, oh, you're incapable. And that was kind of the theme for me. It was always, oh, you're incapable. So that was what I was scared of when I had him. I didn't want people
to
to
look at it and go, the ignorance and the stigma as well, even like saying to you, oh no, I won't put that down. And then that makes you scared. And like you say, you're then hiding it and you don't actually have the opportunity to let it out, which is healthy, but also just give yourself that extra, you know, care and self-awareness.
If I could have walked into my labour and gone, I'm autistic, this is how it presents for me, this is what I need, my experience would have been different.
Yeah.
Fact.
Bless you.
So,
and unfortunately, like you say, there's a lot of women out there who don't know or haven't got anybody to advocate for them because they can't advocate for themselves.
No. And they blame themselves and they think it's their fault.
No, it's true. Well, let's go on to another question, shall we?
That's fine, darling.
We've still got some
20
time.
minutes. Yeah, 25 minutes.
As a parent to an autistic child, what are some of the most important lessons you've learned about supporting and understanding neurodivergent children?
Oh, I love this. So I think for me, something my mum always said to me actually is that your children teach you how to be a parent. And she was like, he will teach you. Like, this is when he was first born. But that's something that's always stuck with me. And something I've realised is when I follow his lead, that things are so much easier for us and they're so much like he's happier, I'm happier. And I realised the more I was trying to make him, you know, be a certain way or act a certain way before I understood it. Like, we've all done it. Yeah. Like, you know, you do things like you take him to the farm and he'd be more interested in running around the fence than looking at the animals. Yeah. and I'd be like, for God, like, you know, I'd get really annoyed or I'd get really upset. I'm like, why is he not doing that? Or, you know, I would be trying to make the situation into something that I couldn't. But when I let all that go, and I was like, you know what, I'm just going to meet him where he is. And if we want to go to a farm and run around the fence, you know what, he's happy. Who cares? And we're still getting out. He's still having that experience. And that was where things changed for us. And as soon as I let all that go and I let all those expectations go, things actually changed in terms of like his progression as well. Because it's almost like he could relax a little bit.
Yeah.
And
like you find as well, you start to see the beauty from their eyes. Like everything like just seems so much more lovely and happy and joy, and you start to notice those things. Yeah.
Especially with like things like stimming. Like, it's funny because I never think, like with the stimming, I've never stopped him stimming. Even before I understood what it was, I never stopped that. And I don't know if that's like an in-tune thing that I just knew because of me. Do you know what I mean? Whereas I sometimes see it with other parents. I see them trying to stop their kids stimming, or they'll be like, oh, how do I get them to not do that? And I'm like, no, you let them do it. Like, they're not doing anything wrong.
As long as they're doing it safe, then let them do it.
As long as he's not doing anything or he's not hurting anyone. If he's hurting someone, that's different. You move them away, or if they're hurting themselves. But if they're not, if my son's just sitting there doing that, who's that hurting? No one. So, you know, it's that kind of thing. And I think it's just kind of, understanding. I think it's just meeting them where they are is the main thing. And, you know, yes, you can absolutely have boundaries, but also I think you realise as well how much of like traditional parenting is based on kind of childism is probably the word for it. Like, we expect so much from kids from such a little age. Like, we expect these little kids to act like they're grown and act like they're grown adults. And I'm like, listen, I struggle to regulate myself at the best of times. I'm not going to expect my 2-year-old, my 3-year-old, my 4-year-old to do that. Like, do I let my son ever be unkind to someone? No, never. If he pushes someone or hurts someone, absolutely not. You know, nope, don't do that. Right, move away. You know, you do all those things. But you know, if he's just being a kid and he's just having a hard time, again, you meet them where they are.
It's about knowing to make those reasonable adjustments and allowances. So, for example, there's a difference between being naughty and having, you know, struggles because of your autism. Yeah.
But even for a typical child, like a child getting upset because they haven't got something they want and they're 4 and they don't know how to deal with that, that's not being naughty. That's just, I'm having a hard time because I've been on this planet for 4 years and it's confusing and, I'm upset because of whatever. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
we as adults get upset about things like that.
And there's things that as a parent of an autistic child, you just let go of. Do you know what I mean? There are things you just let go of. Like, I don't care if my son doesn't eat 5 flipping fruits and veg a day. If it means that he eats the things that I know he's going to eat, that's all that's important to me. If it means that I have to give him a piece of chocolate when he comes out of nursery because that's something we've done since the day he's gone and that's part of his routine, I'm going to continue to do that. And I know I get looks. I know people are like, oh God, like you give him a lot of, I don't care. I've learned to kind of switch it off. No, this is it. And I think, and things like screen time, like, yes, okay, screen time's not great, or for maybe a typical child, you would have limits. For a child like my son, he needs it to regulate. It's part of his routine. So
no, I totally get you.
Is he on it all the time? No, I can't remember the last time he had his tablet, but it's the telly. He likes to have the telly on. I'm not going to stop that for him because it's part of his routine. So it's, it's that, and even things like getting into bed or having their comforts, like bottles and things like he still has a bottle and he's 4. I'm not going to limit that. That's his comfort. That's something he needs. That's part of his regulation. So it's those things. Whereas I think, when you have typical kids, those expectations are different.
Yeah, exactly.
And, but I do think as well, there is an overarching kind of thing of like, even if I had a typical child now, I think I would treat them the same as my son.
Okay.
If that makes sense. Because
in what ways, just so obviously if anyone was watching this, in what ways can you give us some examples?
So things like the screen time regulation, things like, giving words to how they're feeling. If my son's upset, I'm like, oh, you're really angry. I would do that for a typical child. Does that make sense?
Because to be honest with you, even things like that, they are actually very healthy for all children. So
exactly, when we treat all kids like we would an autistic child,
for example, because especially in today's age, there's so much mental health, for example, because children from a young age don't know about those things. But if you're taught about zones, you're then taught to recognise how you're feeling, which is healthy for everybody. So
no, absolutely. And things like sensory breaks. Like, I know of my son, I can't have him indoors all day long, and he doesn't really enjoy things like crafts and that kind of thing. And if I did have a child that did enjoy crafts, obviously that's different. But I know he needs to get out. I know he needs to do certain things. I know he needs to have certain things for sensory regulation. You can do that for you, and you can do that for all children, and all children benefit from that.
No, of course.
But with an autistic child, obviously, it's more the fact that they need it. But it's I think sometimes the expectations that we put on all children are way too much. And actually, what being the parent of an autistic child has taught me to let that go.
Yeah, and also that all children are different.
Yeah,
because there are some children who may be more emotional than others, may have more energy than others, have different interests, and like you say, it's important, I think, if anything, to just adapt to the child and make allowances for all children. Yeah.
Well, this is why sometimes there's an argument. Like, I truly believe that, I look at autism and ADHD as a disability, but I think what's quite interesting with autism and ADHD is it's viewed as a disability because of the way that society is structured. And actually, if we were to change the structure of education and the workplace and all these things, and actually we met people where they were individually, it wouldn't be. We wouldn't even look at it. But because we're, the way society is set up, it's viewed as this massive deficit when it really doesn't need to be. So, it's just, again, meeting kids it's just meeting people where they are. So that's,
And the thing is, I've always said that I believe that there are reasonable adjustments that could be made in society, because obviously we live in a world that wasn't made for us. And there are certain changes that could be made that a neurotypical person wouldn't even notice, but would make the world of difference to a neurodivergent person. And those changes are so minor. Even just little things like, say, for example, you go into a certain clothing shop and some of them now have no labels, it's just printed. That is a reasonable adjustment that could have been done years ago.
Yeah.
And it makes no difference to a neurotypical person, but all the difference to a neurodivergent. But there's loads and loads and loads of things out there. And if people just took the time to look at them and see them, they could be done. And that goes for everything, doesn't it, really?
Yeah. But it's like, you know, all children need sensory regulation. All adults get overstimulated. Obviously, for us, it just happens at a much higher scale and a lot more frequently. And I think it's, just meeting people where they are. And I think if we just, you know, let children have a bit more freedom and a bit more autonomy, it wouldn't feel so hard for the ones that really, really struggle with it. So, you know,
and
I think
it wouldn't
everyone
feel so highlighted either, like it's special allowances. It would just be the norm.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think as well, it's knowing, like, I now understand my son's limits to a degree. Like, I know now not to push him, and we never push him now. Like, if we know we're going, like, he loves, for instance, like, people are always surprised. I'm like, he loves birthday parties, where some autistic kids hate them. If my son did hate birthday parties, I wouldn't take him to them. Do you know what I mean? And it's sometimes I think as parents, we have an expectation of what parenthood is going to be like. And I'm not saying it's easy. I'm not saying that you're not allowed to grieve. That you absolutely are. But I think we need to not direct that to our children. So, like, for instance, you know, if, like, you know, my son didn't like birthday parties, would I be sad that, you know, he never got to go to a birthday party? Yeah, I would, but that's my expectation, not his. If he's not happy in that environment, I can't put him through that. And it's the same with school plays. It's the same with, you know, anything really. Like, if my son didn't want to do the nativity, would I be devastated? Yes, I would, but that's down to me to deal with, not him.
And it's your expectations, like you say.
And I always say to a lot of parents, I'm like, please go and seek therapy, because you need to be able to voice that stuff in a safe environment. You're absolutely allowed to feel that way, and it's completely valid. But I think sometimes what happens is it can manifest as anger towards your child, and that's what we don't want. And resenting your child and resenting your life, which is not, you know, it's not what we want.
No,
so
definitely.
I had CBT to process what was going on with me, because I found it hard. So there's absolutely no shame in that, in saying, do you know what, I'm having a really hard time wrapping my head around my life experience and what my journey as a parent is going to be. So, absolutely.
Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. And it's really, really good advice as well, because like you say, it will then fester into something within your child, because they will take on that energy.
Yeah, absolutely. Kids know. They know from... They don't need you to tell
really
it.
know.
Yeah.
Our kids are very, very in tune as well. Yeah, definitely.
With the environment, 100%.
Okay. Yeah. My kids can tell if my mood is off. They'll give extra cuddles. Right, so let's have a look. How has your neurodivergent identity influenced your perspective on life, relationships, and the world around you?
That's a really hard one to answer, because I don't know what it's like to be neurotypical.
I like that. Do you know what? We'll leave that one. Let's go on to the
I'm happy to say my thing, but it's just... I
like that. It's a good answer, though, because like you say...
I don't know.
I mean, someone like me didn't know... I mean, I've always been neurodivergent, but didn't know, so I suppose I can speak from a time when I thought I was neurotypical. But like you say, you was diagnosed from young.
It's not about being diagnosed. Like, you're always neurodivergent. Even like,
maybe not diagnosed, but I mean, kind of more aware, had things in place.
Yeah. I know
whereas I was just kind of thrown to the wolves.
But in terms of like perspective, like, you know, there's like, I live near an airport, right? So I live near a small airport, and there's a group of men. Very clearly, these men are autistic, and they come every day with the gear, the cameras, watching these airplanes. Like, they love it. Yeah. If I walked up to them and went, you know, you're all autistic, right? They'd all tell me to, you know, do one. But they are. But their perspective of life is shaped by their neurodivergence, and they don't know any other way. And that's the same for me. Like, my perspective on life and how I view situations has always been shaped by my neurodivergence, whether or not I was diagnosed or not. Yeah. You know, that's my brain. My brain is wired that way. That's how my prefrontal cortex is. That's how the neurons are, you know. So all these things and all the signals that my brain gets, and that shapes your perspective and your personality. That's why when people go, oh, you should say you have autism, it really rubs me up the wrong way. So I'm like, no, it's not something I have and I can take away.
It's a part of you.
It's a part. It is me. Yeah. You know, when people go, oh, stop making it your whole personality. No, it is my personality. It is my whole personality.
Who I am.
It is who I am. Like, I can talk about other stuff. There's other interests that I have other than this. You know, things that I care about. Absolutely. But it is me, so I can't really answer
Yeah,
that
no, I get
because
what you
it's
mean. Do you know what's interesting though, when you say about you've always kind of had, that's always shaped your perspective and identity. I always look back and feel like I had two perspectives. One that I now see
okay,
through, and one that I had and thought I
yeah,
had. And they are
yeah,
totally different. So it's
yeah,
interesting. It's interesting to hear you say that.
yeah. I
But
think
it's
it's
fine.
more. I do think I have two. I think I was two people. There's a person I was before my burnout, and there's the
Yeah,
person I was after. That's two different
yeah.
people. And my
And the person
masked
you are
me,
now.
yeah. And the masked me is different to me now, mostly unmasked. I can't sit here and say I'm fully unmasked because there are situations I need to mask, but
Oh, I still
especially when
mask
you're
all
a
the time.
parent, do you know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Oh, of course, and it happens. And of
I
course,
don't know
like,
how to not
even like
mask.
now,
That's my problem.
yeah,
How do you switch
because
off
it's
the
just there.
masking? Yeah.
Yeah, because it's just there. I think it's surrounding yourself with. I read a really good book called Unmasking Autism by Devon Price, and a lot of it is to do with surrounding yourself with people like you and people that get you. So now
Yeah.
I understand what neurodivergence is. Like, even in like my family, especially since I've been diagnosed ADHD, a few of my relatives have now realised they have ADHD and they're now getting diagnosed. And being able to have these conversations with people who maybe 5 years ago would have been like, oh, you're not autistic, what are you talking about? Now they
Yeah.
understand it.
It really
And they've
irritates me still.
yeah, and they've watched my content and they've tried to understand it. Like my dad, for instance, when I was getting my son diagnosed, he found that really hard. And he was one of the people that was like, I don't think you are autistic. And, it's a very long story with me and my dad because I didn't grow up
Yeah.
with him. And, he was like, I don't get it. And I remember just being like, absolutely not. If you think that about me, that's fine. But you are not, like, you're not going to question my son. So I was
Yeah.
like, I can answer whatever questions you like, but this is what's happening. This is reality. And if you don't want to be a part of it, that's fine. Or you can be a part of it. And give him his credit. He went off and he looked up temple grounding. He looked up all these different things. He sends me videos. Have you seen this? He was
Oh,
looking up
good
all
for
this different
him.
stuff. So, and he really changed his perspective on it.
Yeah.
And I think it's more to do for me, the unmasking comes from getting rid of that stigma, like we were saying about the stigma.
Yeah.
When you remove that stigma from yourself, and it's really hard to do that, it's not easy, but when you can do that and you go, actually, I'm not broken, I'm not a shit person, I'm none of these things, I'm not less than, I'm not incapable, my brain is wired like this is how it is, this is the accommodations I need, this is where my strengths are. When you understand that, then you can kind of go, right, this is what I need.
Yeah.
And even being able to turn around to my son's school and go, yeah, I'm autistic and ADHD. And they're like, okay, like, the school know, the nursery know.
Yeah.
I've been open about it because I've had to be. So, and it's helped them know how to deal with me, if that makes sense. Because they know, right,
Oh,
we need to explain things to her. Does your
I always say
children's
I'm
school
happier
know?
now. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm very open about that.
Yeah.
And you know what it is? I always say I'm happier now because I mask less and I make more allowances. But there's still
100%.
times where afterwards I realised I have been and I'm like, why? It's like it's an automatic autopilot. And then I have the effects of it from burnout. And I'm like, if only I could just not. But it kind of just, like I said, it comes in naturally.
I think it's about how you want to present yourself as well. Like, obviously, to a degree, we all do it. Every person, you're going to act different to your boss than when you're going to act to your best friend. And I think this is how I try. This is how I try and explain it to neurotypicals. I'm like, imagine if obviously you act different to your boss, how you act to your best friend. But imagine doing that with literally everyone. And they were like, God, and that is what it's like. You're literally doing it with everyone because you want to put a certain face on and you want to present yourself in a certain way, and because of the stigma that surrounds autism, if I turn around and go, oh, I'm autistic and I'm struggling with this conversation because I can hear the fridge making a noise and blah blah blah, people look at me and go, oh, I don't want to be around her. So obviously, because you think that's what's going to happen, you put on a mask.
You kind of don't want to make a fuss. That's what Chase always says. He doesn't want to make a fuss.
Yeah, that's exactly it. And what's really nice what's interesting in my son, so obviously he's 4, and I'm starting to wonder if he's masking in certain situations, but we've never ever made him feel like, if he needs something, we're like, okay, that's fine. Like we've never gone, for God's sake, why are you doing that? Because, I think the more you do that, that's what makes him think, oh, like if I ask for too much. And that was kind of my experience growing up. Like if I was upset for something or something was happening, it was a bit like, oh, for God's sake, don't do that, I ain't got time for that. And that was how it was. So I quickly learned, I can't ask for things because it's an inconvenience. So that's where it came in as well. Whereas with my son, we really try hard. I'm not saying we're perfect at it, and there aren't times I'm like, for God's sake, I ain't got time.
No, of course,
I'm trying to wash up, mate. Go away for 2 minutes. I'm trying to cook dinner, whatever. But between me and my partner, we try really hard to make sure one of us is always kind of present and
no, I get you,
to kind of prevent that happening. But it's impossible to be. You can't do it perfectly.
It makes sense. I'm the same with my kids, and not even still now. Chase will ask for the smallest thing, or he'll just come in and say, "Oh, you're right, Mum," and then he will apologise, and he'll say, "Oh, sorry if I bothered you," or "Sorry if I'm giving you extra work," and I'm like, "No, I'm your mum, and it's my job. Don't apologise. What do you need?" But it's kind of, again, I guess it comes down to the social side of autism, doesn't it? Because that is a big thing. And masking, by the way, Remy's been masking since she was a baby. It's a natural thing.
It's a survival technique. I want to learn
more about it. Yeah.
It's funny, I was talking to another creator, Sarita Fontaine. She's like ADHD, and we done a whole episode on my podcast about survival techniques, and we were like, masking makes sense from an evolutionary perspective. If you imagine like a pack of wolves or a pack of animals, like we're pack animals, right? So as humans, we're pack animals and we're in tribes. If you imagine if there was an autistic person within that tribe who was acting differently, they would get shunned from the tribe. So they had to learn to act like everyone else to stay within the tribe. And what's also interesting is that ADHDers would have been the hunter-gatherers, and so would the autistics. The autistics would have been making the fires. They would have been making stuff. They'd have been making the weapons. And the ADHDers, because of our unusual sleeping patterns, we would have been the hunter-gatherers. So it was actually beneficial, which is why I believe these differences in neurology have come, and, we're now in the modern age and we still have them. Yeah. Because it makes sense that we were like that. So it made sense then, and it makes sense. That's why we mask from like an evolutionary perspective. But
it's evolution, like we say, is like subconsciously our bodies act in certain ways without us, like autopilot, having
our
to
brains
do,
haven't our brains haven't developed in 5,000 years. There's been no differences to our brains in around 5,000 years. Wow. So our brains at their core still think we live in tribes, and still think if I'm on my own, I'm going to starve and die and get eaten by a bear. Like, that's the base of our brains. So even though we know now,
like the fight or flight response.
Absolutely. Yeah. And even though we know now, well, no, that's not going to happen. We don't need to be hunter-gatherers. McDonald's is up the road, the supermarket, we've got everything here. We're not digging farms anymore. Like, it's all there in abundance. But our brains at its core doesn't know that. So we're constantly having to remind our brains, like, no, this is what it is. So this is why I think, again, with the masking, we think, oh, if I get shunned by my tribe, I'm going to die. I'm going to starve. So
it makes perfect sense.
It makes sense,
Yeah. Oh, God, exhausting.
Sorry.
Right, have we got... No, don't apologise. I'm just more thinking about Remy and just kind of always wondering, because she comes and she's absolutely exhausted. So, do we do one more question, or have you got to go?
I think we've got time for one more. I've got to go. Yeah, one more. Got 10 minutes. So, one more. Sorry.
Do I need to? No, don't be silly. But we can do another one on another day.
Yeah, that's fine. We can do that. Yeah.
Now we've got you. We're going to be using you often.
I still need to do a blog. I've actually got time now to sit and write, so I can do some writing as well.
Yeah, no, and there's loads of ways that we want to work with you anyway. So this is just an introduction. I'm just trying to think. Where are we? So
I fully can't remember what questions you sent me.
Can you share any memorable experiences or breakthrough moments that have shaped your understanding of neurodiversity and neurodivergent advocacy? It's a lot of words. Or can you just can you share something? Can you share something memorable that has kind of shaped how you advocate for yourself?
Oh,
and Brody, of course, and just everybody. Because you advocate for everyone, so
yeah. I don't. It's really weird the way my brain works. I really struggle to remember stuff. So where people talk about these
ADHD babes,
pivotal moments in their life, and I'm like, it's all just one big blur.
It's ADHD.
Is it the ADHD?
Yeah. So basically, have you ever found that you get really excited for an event that's coming up, and then when the event's over, you don't remember the event?
Yes.
So
Literally
like
happened
I
this
get
weekend.
really excited
Yeah.
to, I don't know, organise one of my kids' birthday parties, and I get so excited, and I get really upset after because I don't remember any of it.
Because it went by in a blur.
Yeah.
Yeah, literally. This is
Basically,
why
it's
I'm
because
so
our
big on
brains-
pictures.
Right. So
Yeah.
when we, yeah, me too, and videos and stuff, because I can then relive it.
I can relive it,
When we
yeah,
are
yeah.
in the moment, we are taking in so much information that we don't actually concentrate on anything enough to remember it.
No,
And that's basically it. That's
Is
why.
that what it is? Oh my
That's
God,
what it
like,
is.
literally, my best friend's wedding
I
was at the
thought I
weekend.
had Alzheimer's.
Same. And I'm convinced I'm going to get dementia. Like, you know, it was my best friend's wedding at the weekend, and I'm like, I don't remember shit. And it was literally this weekend, and like my partner's saying different things, and like the other bridesmaids, oh, remember this happened, and I'm like,
It's ADHD.
no,
though. That's what it is.
And I remember
Do you also
bits,
find
like,
you don't recognise
flashes.
faces and names?
All the time.
Right.
I've got a particular couple that we're friends with, and if I see the wife without the husband, I do not recognise her. And it's really embarrassing because, like, she's at the school, she's local, she's like, oh, hi, Amber. And I'm like, she must think I'm the rudest bitch. And I've had to, sorry, excuse me, she must think I'm so rude. And I've had to say to my partner, like, please, can you explain to Sam? Like, I don't mean to do it. Like, I literally, her face just does not register in my brain. And it does, like, the dots don't connect. And I'm like, oh. But anyway. But
I'm the same with a few people. It's actually an ADHD thing. It's very
Is
common.
it an ADHD? I would say, in terms of pivotal moments, in terms of my advocacy, in all honesty, I would say a big part of that was actually meeting you. And I'm not saying that, like, once I knew I wasn't on my own,
Sorry,
and I could, you know, connect to my parents. And I think at first my content was kind of geared towards a way of almost like, oh, if you're a parent and your kid's autistic, don't worry, we're fine, because I'm fine.
Yeah.
And which is really problematic, and actually was entrenched in a lot of ableism and went like internalized ableism. And when I realised actually the way that I was viewing everything was from that mindset, that was when it changed. That's when I was like, oh, wait, I'm getting this completely wrong. And actually what I need to be doing is just sharing my experience and just sharing my internal feelings. And I think because for me, my experience as an autistic woman has always been very, very internal. And it's always been something I've kept to myself, and I've never spoken about it. And just getting messages from people, like I get messages like without being like up myself, obviously, because I've got the podcast as well. Like my podcast is quite big in Australia, randomly in America. I've got more of an American and Australian following than what I do in the UK.
That's amazing.
Podcast. Yeah, which is mad.
There's a lot more people.
And I'm like, well, yeah, but I'm like, do you guys even understand me? Like, I'm not, you know, even my voice. I'm like, how do you understand my accent?
You actually speak very clearly and very well.
Yes, that's funny. As someone who's always told I don't speak very clearly and people struggle to understand me growing up, that's wild to me. I always worry about how I sound. So, like when people like messaging me and they're like, oh, like I've started the process because of you, or oh, like I now understand this thing about myself because you wrote about this.
It's the most amazing feeling though as well, isn't it?
It's the most amazing and almost like scary feeling. Like I was walking along a few weeks ago and someone stopped me in the street in my village and was like, oh, I listened to your podcast. And I went, I literally went, and then like Brody started going, so he wanted to move, and I was like, bye, and I went, and then I found she messaged me, and I was like, I'm so sorry. She was like, no, it's fine. Her son's in the same school as my son. She's been a massive help, and she was like, sorry, I didn't know if I should approach you, and I was like, no, it's fine, but like it freaks me out because I forget that people are actually going to listen to it.
No, yeah,
because I'm in a bubble.
It happened to me in Westfield. John Lewis.
Really?
Someone came to me and she was like, Charlotte. And I looked at her, my partner looked at me. She was like, I'm so sorry. She said, I'll follow you on Instagram. And I was like, oh.
They feel like
afterwards,
they know you.
He kept looking at me going, followed you on Instagram, you got fans.
Yeah.
Westfield, John Lewis.
Oh my God.
But no, it's nice though, because it means people are actually taking in what
it
you're
means
saying
it's
and
making an impact.
Exactly.
And that's all I've ever wanted, is to make some kind of impact. And like we've spoken about this before, unfortunately and I didn't really notice until I got on TikTok, there's a whole other level that it's like the community is kind of split in quite a few different ways. And there's a whole other level of people that are like almost doing this for the wrong reasons, or they're doing it for, I'm not really sure. Not even that,
trending.
But just trending. I don't know. More like they're angry. There's a lot of that as well.
There's
There's a
that
lot of
too.
anger. There's a lot of anger.
There's like a pie with different sections.
Yeah,
There's
yeah,
people
yeah,
who are
yeah.
angry, people who
Do it
just
for
want something
clout.
to talk
Yeah.
about, and clout,
Yeah.
clickbait, it's a trend.
Yeah.
Companies who want to be seen, to be supportive, and then you have people who
Supporting
genuinely
diversity.
just share
Want to help.
what's going on and want to
Their
genuinely help
experience.
in an honest way. And
Yeah.
we need more of that.
Yeah. We do. And, you know, I think now the people I speak to all the time and the community I've created, like for myself and for other people, and I'm like, wow, like that's amazing, because it's been a therapy for me. I'll be totally honest. This has been my therapy. This has been my way of understanding me more than anything, and understanding my son. And if it wasn't for, like I said earlier, if it wasn't for social media, I don't know if I'd have been able to have done that. So it's given me like a way to have a voice.
Your change as well. Even your confidence, and I just feel like you seem more like you're even at one with yourself, if that makes sense. Like,
no, I do.
Yeah,
I feel like
brilliant.
I feel like I understand now. Like, this is my identity. Yeah, this is what I mean. It's weird when people were like, oh, you know, like I laughed and cried on your episode. Like people like, I literally cried listening to your episode, and I'm like, why are you crying? It wasn't meant to be sad. And they're like, no, like it's. Or like they feel like they know me and they feel like I'm a friend, and it's like, oh, my friend I get to listen to every week, and I'm like, oh, that's mad, because
that's beautiful.
Yeah, but like you always feel
the change in just those couple of years, babe.
Yeah, I know.
From not feeling comfortable to having people across the world listen to you, cry because they can relate, having those eureka moments, finally finding the confidence in themselves now to go and get a diagnosis or seek help or whatever it may be, or just even if they're not seeking help, just coming back to listen to you because that helps them is absolutely amazing.
It's mad.
Go Amber.
And like in a I do get massive imposter syndrome, don't get me wrong. Like I'm always a bit like, oh god, I don't deserve this, and you know, and I try and do things, and then I'm like, oh, I can't.
That's why I don't post anymore. The imposter syndrome was a bit much for me, so I'm taking a bit of a break. But
I must admit that I've had to do the same, but mainly because I'm in this whole EHCP thing, so that's the main. I've had to put so much energy in that. I don't have the energy to create.
But that's
as much at the
advocating for
moment.
yourself and making those allowances that you need.
I can't be sat here on Instagram and TikTok making videos and dropping the ball with my own kid. I can't. No, so that's kind of where I am at the minute. So, and to be fair, my page is done just as well without me posting anything. So I think it's quite nice that it doesn't really matter. You can go back to it. So when you're ready, and I think that's the beauty of it. And I think, again, that's another way that we understand ourselves more. We understand our creative processes a bit more. We can't be consistent posting 5 times a week, blah blah blah. We can't do that. We can't do a Brock Johnson and post 5 times a day, whatever it is he's on now, like, because it doesn't work for our brain. It doesn't work for our brains. It doesn't work because we have to, you know, work the way that we work. And I find that actually the most profound content, the content that I find actually really helps people the most, the stuff that I generally tend to make in the moment. The things that I actually try and pre-plan and do don't really land. Whereas if I just write something on my notes on my phone and post that, that's the thing that goes viral, and that's the thing that actually has the most impact. And for me, I don't care about going viral. I couldn't give a monkeys how many followers I have, whatever. As long as the people that do follow me, the people that do watch my content are getting what they need to get from it. That's my only
And you
goal,
keep your integrity as well.
Yeah.
I can relate to that though. Those posts that you just send out in the moment with that natural emotion are always the best.
Yeah, definitely. Right, I've actually got to run.